God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Indeed, thanks be to God for our many and varied gifts that bring us together in the richness of one. Now, I imagine you know that the choir didn't stand up and start singing that just spontaneously. There was some practice, wasn't there, Brian? Just a bit, huh? And as we know, in order to do things together, or do things well on our own, it does take practice to master a sport, to master an instrument, to master a habit. When I was a young girl, I took piano lessons like many of us did, and practicing was not something that came naturally to me. And so my mother she had a beautiful little blown glass piano. Have you seen those? And I thought was so beautiful. And she had a little music box in it. So every once in a while, when I would tend to forget to practice, she would take that piano out and just kind of gently put it someplace. That's a symbol to remind me that yes, I do need to practice if I am going to get better with the piano. A friend of mine was trying to eat more nutritiously, and so what she did, she took some pictures of some luscious fruits and vegetables and posted them on her refrigerator as a symbol for nutrition. And every time she saw that symbol, she was able to practice better eating habits. Another friend of mine wanted to practice an attitude of gratitude, and what made her thankful was to just be in nature. And so what she did every day, she went outside and took a walk, and on her walk she picked up something from nature, from her backyard, usually a bouquet of flowers or perhaps an autumn leaf, and has a place in on her table where she can see it every day, and that symbol reminds her to practice an attitude of thanksgiving to God. Practice helps form who we are, our attitudes and our beings. This is true when it comes to us as people of God too. And we as Christians have a symbol that we come to every single week that helps us practice what it means to be people of faith. And as disciples, we say it every week, we are people of the table. We welcome all to the table. The table is a symbol which reminds us how to practice our faith. And there are 6 things that I'm going to talk about today. And some people who are there at first service they wish they had taken notes. So if you want to write these 6 things down, there's a little surprise after this, and maybe you'll catch on. The first thing we need to do is practice our faith, is to practice community. This table reminds us of community. If you think about it, tables are wonderful places for people to gather, whether inside the church or outside the church. Around tables, stories are told, laughter is shared, connections are made, food is passed, community happens. And the more people get together around tables, the more opportunity there is for community to deepen and grow. And this table reminds us that when we come together as Christians around the table, we are a community. Community, unity. We are one around this table. Jesus knew this very well. If you think about much of his ministry was set around tables. The table when he was invited to Simon's house and did some healing. The table when he was invited to Zacchaeus' house and Zacchaeus and that community changed his ways. The table when he gathered around his friends and told them the most intimate things he could possibly tell about himself on that last night. Tables bring us together and help us form a tight community. And that's why this table here that we come to every single week helps us remember and practice community. The second thing table helps us practice is hope. Now, there's not very many places or times during the week in our lives that we intentionally practice hope. And if we don't do that, it's very easy to become cynical, especially when we read the newspaper, when we listen to the television, when we talk to friends. There's not a lot of hope hope that's shared. But when we come to this table, we are reminded that we are people of hope, to practice hope. We hope that our sisters and brothers in other parts of the world will someday have enough food on the tables. We have hope that someday Christ will come and live in His glory among us today, that all the world will know God's love and justice. We hope that someday all Christians, all people will come together as one. We practice hope at this table. We also practice remembering. Remember when Jesus gathered around the table as friends and He broke the bread and He poured the wine and said, "Remember me"? That's what Christians are called to do. Remember, not just remember that one event, but remember all the way back to how God has been with us throughout life. Not just our own individual lives of ups and downs, but the life of God's world, God's people. Remember who God is. God is the one who created us in love. God is the one who called us out of slavery and into the wilderness and sustained us in the wilderness. God is the one who was with us in our most lost time in our history. God is the one who promises to be with us in the Christ. God is who we remember. God's love, God's forgiveness, God's compassion is what we remember every time we come to the table. The table helps us practice remembering who God is and whose we are. Remember when we come to the table. That's the third. The fourth is this table helps us practice invitation. Because you see, we were invited to this table. At this table where Christ invites us, we receive that welcome and grace and love. And therefore, we are asked to practice that same invitation that Christ gives to the world. We are Christ's voice that invites. We are, when we come to this table, practicing Christ's hands that reach out at invitation. Invitation is what we practice when we come to this table. Every parent knows the pain of what it's like when your kid didn't get that invitation and everybody else did. Nobody would wish that on anyone. When we are people of Christ's invitation, we simply say, all are welcome. All are invited. We don't have to choose who comes because Christ does the choosing. Christ does the loving. Christ does the inviting. And that's good news. We can practice that. And the table reminds us of that. The table also helps us to practice serving. In this culture, in this country, we don't get many opportunities to practice serving because you see, we are more of a consumer-oriented society, aren't we? We want to see what can people give to us, not how can we serve others. But this table reminds us that we are called to serve. Think of how Christ served His disciples around that table. Think about how Christ served others throughout His life. This table is a table where serving comes first. And if you think about it, when the bread comes around or the tray comes around, in that moment where you serve your neighbor and your neighbor takes hold of the other side of the tray, you can't tell who is serving or who is receiving. And that is where Christ is. That moment where serving and being served becomes one is a holy moment. Come to the table and practice serving. And then finally, this table reminds us to practice thanksgiving. We are a people who have so much to be thankful for. God has given us so much. This table reminds us of the abundance of love and grace and forgiveness and compassion that is ours. Why should we not be thankful? Why should we not respond in generosity to a God who has given us all? Thanksgiving is what we practice at this table. And you know, the more you practice, the more it becomes part of who you are. Now, if you wrote those words down, did you notice what the cross were? We've got community. We've got hope. We've got remembrance, invitation, service, and thanksgiving. Who does that spell? Christ. Christ at this table said, every time you gather, do this. Every time you gather, practice who I am, he says. Every time you gather, practice being a disciple, practice being Christ-like, practice community, practice hope, practice remembering, practice inviting, practice serving, and practice thanksgiving. Remember who I am, he says, and practice it. You know, they say practice makes perfect. And of course, you know, we will never be perfect. But we as Christians, together around the world, can begin practicing what it means when Christ says, do this. Friends, come to this table. Come and practice. Come and give thanks. God, Christ, is here. Let us sing together our hymn that reminds us who Christ is and who we are by our words and service and actions.